You wanna role play the exclusive buyer's agency agreement?
Sure.
So the whole purpose of today is that every one of the documents that you sign and you have buyers and sellers sign come with a unique lingo that, huh?
How many copies?
Oh, I only have one.
Okay. Everybody obviously said they've seen a buyer agency agreement, correct? At this point, I hope you all have it at this point, right? If you haven't, then we're some trouble, right?
So the buyer's agency agreement has always been around, so don't think that after the law changed in last August, that they suddenly wrote this all up. We've always had it. It wasn't widely used, and at that point, one office was afraid to require it because another office wasn't requiring it. And the agents would say, well, I can't ask my buyers to sign a buyer agency agreement. They're gonna walk out the door and go a block and go to the next real estate office where they don't require it. But now you can't work with a buyer without having one of these documents signed. It's actually one of the first things you need to do even before you show them property, is to get this and the CIS signed and have your little buyer consultation. There's a lot of little nuances to this. So I'm gonna be the buyer.
Okay.
And Keith's gonna be the agent. He's gonna try to get me to sign a buyer's agency agreement with the lingo.
That's fine. So I ultimately say pretty much verbatim the same thing to every buyer, right? So that nobody can ever come back to me and tell me, oh, you didn't tell me that. And I'm always say, yeah, I did. You may have not remembered it, but I say the same thing, almost like word for word to a certain extent, right? Might alter depending on how the conversation comes in. But when you have a buyer consultation appointment first, right? And in the beginning, when you're a newer realtor, generally somebody wants to go see something, and I'm speaking from experience right now, right? Anytime I speak about something, it's because I did it, and I always try to help other agents not make the same mistakes that I did, or just kind of shorten down the learning curve to a certain extent, right? In the beginning, somebody wants to see something and you're dropping everything and running, right? At any given time. And again, I was more than guilty of it, right? Once you get to a certain point, you start getting a little bit more neurotic about your time, and you're not dropping everything and running, because more times than not, you're dropping everything and running to go show a home that the buyer's not gonna buy, right? And I think by kind of pumping the brakes in the beginning and saying, hey, I would love to go show you this home, but we need to connect for at least 30 minutes prior to seeing the home. You then instantly gain control of the narrative and the conversation, right? And you always need to be in control of the conversation. This goes with a buyer, more along the lines with a seller. You need to be controlling the conversation when you're on a listing appointment, but you need to kind of approach a buyer's appointment the same way as you do a listing appointment, right? And as Joyce said, these were always available. They were never a requirement, right? When they came into play, I wasn't nervous about this document at all, because I said to myself, well, one, I know I'm gonna make more money because of this now. And how am I gonna make more money because of it? Because I never had anybody sign this, and I didn't learn my lesson. I got more than one time, honestly, more than 5 times in my career, I got burned, in the sense that you'd be working with a buyer for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, maybe even somebody over longer than a year. Right, and then all of a sudden you don't hear stuff from somebody for 2 to 3 weeks. I'm letting you all know right now, if you don't hear from one of your clients for 2 to 3 weeks, that's not a good thing. They're talking to somebody else. Something else is going on, right? And this protects you, protects me, right? So when Bobby's at a barbecue and just so happens to be talking to Roger, the next door neighbor, who knows somebody who's selling a home, I'm not getting X'd out the box anymore. Right, because I have this to protect me, to make sure that I get paid, right? Because it's a hard lesson, and as I just said, I never really learned my lesson. When you're working with somebody for an extended period of time, right? And we all know we're not getting paid unless we cross the finish line. And then you're working with somebody for 8 months and you find out that they're under contract. That sucks. That sucks, right? So they put it into play to protect the buyer. I don't really know if it's really protecting the buyer, if you want me to be honest with you. I don't really think this is protecting the buyer any which way. I do think it does protect us though, right? And when you slow down the conversation. And fully explain all the different documents. This is very easy to get signed, right? But when you're having a conversation in regards to this document, and I know some agents, and I'm sure some of them are gonna walk in shortly. When you're attempting to explain this document over a text message. There's no value,
Or an email.
or even in an email, right? There's no value in it. Right? So you think that somebody's gonna sign this and say. Yeah, sure, I'm gonna pay you 3%, but I have no idea what you're gonna do for me, or I don't even know who you are, really, right? No, they're not gonna sign it. Yeah, they're gonna give you resistance on it, right? But when you fully explain each document and then at the end of it, you explain this. I don't ever get a rebuttal on it, right? And there are some agents out there. Or even coaches for that matter, that the way they've explained it. I'm not scared of this document, right? So I don't kind of just give a little bunch of fluff and say, and say, all right, yeah, sign this, and then go act like I'm doing something and hoping that they sign it. That's not a way to go about it. Be confident in what you're saying, right? You're the professional on this, even if you're new to it. Confidence comes from education, right? If you know what you're talking about, it's gonna project in your voice, right? But when you're really nervous about this document, nobody's gonna sign it, right? And at the end of the day. It really is just a piece of paper because they claim to cancel it, right? There's really no. I mean, she could probably speak about it, or I know she could speak about it a little bit more in detail than I can, but they can't cancel it, right? So it's not really like they're
3
locked.
days written notice
Yeah, it's
by
not really,
either party.
it's not really like they're locked into it at the end of the day, right? So it's just another signature that we kind of need, right? Do you have all the documents with you?
For the buyer?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Here you go.
Alright. So Joyce, thank you so much for coming in today, and before we kind of really get started in regard to what you're looking for and how I can help service you and find you that property, we start doing a bunch of pointing and clicking. On the MLS, there are just a number of documents that I'm gonna need to explain to you, and I'm gonna need you to sign for the real estate commission. There is a lot of verbiage on here. I'm pretty confident that most of the verbiage on here you're not going to understand, so I'm just gonna do my best to explain this in a very simplistic way, right?
Okay.
So the first document that you're gonna be signing is something called the Consumer Information Statement, or a CIS, right? A CIS is ultimately disclosing to you on who anybody and everybody can be in a real estate transaction. That doesn't mean that everybody named in this document will be utilized in a real estate transaction, but it's explaining to you who each party is and ultimately what their duties are to a certain extent, right? In this instant, if you and I decide that it's a good fit for us to work together, notice how I said right there, if you and I decide to work together, it's also my decision to work with her, right? If I don't think it's gonna be a good fit, if I don't think that she is gonna be a coachable client, I may say, you know what, Joyce, I truly appreciate your time. I don't know if this is gonna necessarily be, I'm gonna be the best fit for you, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I wanna make sure that your service to, to the max and ultimately cross the finish line, right? I may have not have said something along those lines in year one, right? Maybe not even in year two. But at this point in my career, no, I do protect my sanity, right? If I'm gonna be working with somebody that. I have a hard time working with people that. Are know-it-alls and just act like they know more than I do, right? And I'm not saying I know everything about real estate, but I'm the professional on this, and if you're not coachable. I don't know if I wanna work with you, right? I've earned the right to say that though, right? I got to that point in my career that I could kind of say. No, this isn't gonna be worth my time, right? Because at the end of the day, your number one objective is to service that client and get them across the finish line, right? Their number one objective is to cross the finish line too. But if it doesn't mesh well, it's gonna just be a stressful time, right? And I have no problem saying that to people, right? So anyway, in this instance, I would be considered a buyer's agent. I'm here to represent you. Be an advocate for you and make sure that, you're getting serviced properly, as well as we're finding the right home that you're looking for. When we're going to look at a home or we're submitting an offer, the person representing, the realtor representing the seller would be considered a seller's agent, right? They're there to protect the seller and service the seller, and make sure that the seller is ultimately getting a fair deal, right? I'm also in some sense here, make sure that you're also getting a fair deal and that we're not overpaying for a home or overextending ourselves for a home, right? I hate to use the words overpaying because what is actually overpaying for a home, right? The market determines the market value. You determine if you think that the value for that home is a good
what I
price for
can
you going.
afford.
Yeah, exactly. In the instance that, you know, we potentially look at a property that, I may be also representing the seller and or. There might be a listing that from my brokerage, in that instance, we would be considered dual agents, right? A dual agent means I'm here, you're here, and the seller's here, right? I can't tell you ultimately what number to go in at. I can't inform them on what number to accept. I'm there to make sure everybody's getting a fair deal and, you know, ultimately, bringing you two together to have a sales contract. Another person that could potentially be involved would be, well, actually, there wouldn't be a transaction agent involved in this instance, but on here. If I was, let's say, helping you sell your home, right? There's another agent called the transaction agent, right? Transaction agent, never really knew what they actually did until I was involved in a deal with them, and ultimately, they just bring me the buyer. And then do nothing. If I don't ever have to do another deal with a transaction agent again in my life, I wouldn't be upset with that. So again, ultimately, this document is considered the consumer information statement, and it's gonna fully disclose to you who everybody is within a real estate transaction. Another document that we are gonna have to sign is the wire fraud notice, right? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there's a lot of scammers out there, right? And there's even scammers in the real estate industry. I don't know how these people find out this information, but somehow they're able to find out when closings are going to happen, right? And they contact you and they tell you that you need to wire X amount of dollars to this account. The account number looks exactly like the account number that your attorney or the title company told you to wire money to as well. But a slight little difference, and more times than not, you can't pick up on that slight little difference. But once that wire transfer is initiated, you're not getting that money back. I'm here to tell you now, at no time will I call you up, or somebody will call you up and say, hey, you need to wire the money to such and such. Unless it's coming from either your attorney and you verbally hear him, or the title company. Don't wire money unless somebody fully signs off on it, because there are many scammers out there, and unfortunately, many people lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. The next document is the dual agency document, okay? Ultimately, you need to be okay with me potentially acting as a dual agent, right? As I mentioned prior, a dual agent, in a dual agent situation, the agent is representing both the seller and representing the buyer. Another layer to that, it would be some dual agency, right? If we go look at a property and my colleague who is also a realtor at Kellerways Park Views is listing the property, we would be considered in dual agency, right? Because I hold my license at KW Park Views and they hold their license at KW Park Views. If you are not comfortable with something along those lines, then we would not be able to show you any properties listed at a KW Park Views, right? And you know, we have close to 200 agents. We have a lot of listings specifically in the areas that you and I are looking for. So I really think that we would be doing you a disservice if you weren't okay with that, right? But if you're not, I fully understand. All right, the next document would be our affiliated business disclosures, right? Besides KW Park Views, we also have 3 affiliated businesses. The first affiliated business would be Carnegie Title, right? When we're purchasing a home, there's also going to be a title company involved in it. The title company is going to do a title search to make sure that the seller in fact owns that home free and clear. The key word in that is free and clear. That's Carnegie Title. The other affiliated business is Carnegie Mortgage, right? You're not obligated to work with Carnegie Mortgage, but it is an affiliated business that we do have here. Any of these companies that I mentioned, I do advocate for them because I do have direct contact with them, and I'm a very hands-on realtor and I like to have direct contact with people. I don't like when I keep getting pushed around or I have to check on an email chain or something along those lines. The last affiliated business is Carnegie Home and Auto. Again, you're not obligated to use them. I will tell you that they do save people a lot of money. And ultimately, I just need you to sign this document stating that you and I have had a conversation and I disclosed to you the business relationships with them.
Very smoothly.
What's that?
Very. It's good, right? Those.
Why I told him to do this, wait, are we into the EBA? Not yet,
No.
okay.
Though, another document that you may potentially be signing is the lead paint document, right? Well, the reason why I say may potentially be signing is because any home built before the year 1978 potentially had lead paint based in it, right? People get all nervous when they hear that, it's so far that I even have to give you a booklet disclosing to you what lead paint is. You know how you get rid of lead paint?
No, how?
Paint over it. Sounds silly, but it's pretty simple, right? Unless you get bored one day, let's just say one day you're home bored, you have nothing to do. And for 5 hours, you just sat there, with a piece of sandpaper, standing down, and then you finally got to that lead paint. That's really the only time that that lead paint would become an issue, right? If it's built after 1978, we have nothing to really discuss because we don't have to sign the document. But again, if the home is built before 1978, it's a lead paint disclosure. You can do a test on it if you'd like. In my career, I've never had anybody ask for us to do a lead paint test. But again, the only time that lead paint becomes an issue is if you get bored for 5 hours with a piece of sandpaper. I've never really seen that become an issue, but for your own peace of mind, if you did want to do an inspection, we can do one, okay? The last two documents the last document that you will be signing, and then the second to last that you could potentially be signing, and if you would be signing this, and Phil would actually just find a great place for you to go, right? That would be a sales contract. This is the exclusive buyer agency agreement. So just like there's a listing agreement that protects the seller, right? And it discloses all the duties that the listing agent has to the seller. On the flip side of that, now it's called the exclusive buyer agency agreement, right? Ultimately, as much as it's protecting you, I really look at it that it's protecting me, right? People are always like, well, how's it protecting you? It's protecting me so that in 6 months' time, if for some reason we don't happen to find you a home and you're at a barbecue, right? And you're speaking to Jane, your neighbor, Jane, your neighbor can't tell you about a home that's for sale, and then you go purchase that home and X me out of the box. This fully protects me as well as fully protects you, right? It's gonna tell you exactly what my duties are to you or for you and how I'm gonna advocate for you. It's gonna tell you exactly the areas that I'm working for you. The main key to this document is when it comes to commissions, right? No buyer ever wants to pay additional money out of their pocket after purchasing a home. But unfortunately, we've come to a point in the real estate industry that some sellers aren't willing to pay a buyer agency agreement or buyer agent commission, excuse me. The buyer agent commission would generally come from the proceeds from the seller, right? Then there was a big lawsuit out in the Midwest, and the only people that really benefited from that lawsuit, in my opinion, were the attorneys, right? I think that this document actually hurt a buyer because many buyers are using all their money more times than not to purchase a home. And now I'm here to tell you that on top of the money that you have to use to purchase a home, you may run the risk of potentially having to pay me too. Many times I hear back in return, Keith, I don't have any extra money to pay you, right?
I was just about to say that.
Right, and I take a lot of pride and say, I've never had a buyer have to pay me, right? I negotiate that every seller pays me, even if they say that they're not going to pay me, I make it happen so that my buyers don't have to pay any additional money. Because I don't think it's fair to you, right? The same way everybody benefited over the last 60+ years, right? Of the seller paying out buyer agent commission, the same way that I think that you should benefit from it as well, right? We do have to put on that document though, what percentage that, or I need to put on that document on what percentage that I would be willing to work for you for, right? There's another proportion of that buyer agency agreement that I could check a box to say that to include in all your offers that the seller is paying by commission. So ultimately, the reason why we need to discuss this document is because there are some homes out there that the seller isn't willing to pay. Now, if you don't have the ability to pay me a commission, right? Then we can't be looking at homes that aren't cooperating with buyer agency commission, right? You already just said you don't have any additional money, right? So I already know on how we're gonna leverage our offers and making sure that the seller pays me. But ultimately on here, if you get to this point on here, fully discloses. Who you are, who I am, who you are again, the areas that I'm, working for you. Ultimately, I usually just put New Jersey because I do business all over New Jersey, and I don't like to just kind of be pigeonholed into one specific town or one specific county. Down here, right? This kind of goes back into what I was saying to you about the CIS, right? Remember when I spoke to you about
Right.
dual agency? We didn't get to the point of a designated agency. It kind of falls in line with dual agency, right, to a certain extent. Let's just say I showed you a property. And I was the listing agent. Right, in that instance, that would be a dual agent, but if you came back to me and said, Keith, I'm not comfortable with you representing both parties. I would then go to my broker and ask for her to assign an agent to represent the seller. In that instance, we would be considered a designated agent, right? The broker designated a realtor from my brokerage to represent the seller. You want me to represent you, and then I negotiate back and forth with that agent, right? So then ultimately, you're not negotiating against yourself, because if I wasn't a dual agent, as I said to you prior, I can't tell you what number to go in at. I can't tell the seller what number to accept, right? I'm just there to make sure everybody gets a fair deal. The term. This could go for one day. This could go for one home. This could go for 1 year. It could just be open-ended, right? You could cancel this at any time, though, like I said to you prior. So as much as this is a binding agreement. I'll debate with anybody that's not a binding agreement, because you can cancel it at any time. There's nothing binding to it if you can cancel it at any time. You're not locked into it, is ultimately what I'm saying, right? We could have a defined day on when it's going to end. We have a defined time when it's going to end. It's honestly up to you. In the beginning, many times, when I'm working with new buyers, to prove my worth to you, so you don't feel like you're locked into anything, we could just do this for one day, right? I want you to feel comfortable signing this and not walking away itching your head saying, I have no idea what I just signed and how I'm gonna pay this guy, right? To go further down this document, as I was saying to you before, we have to put a defined dollar amount or defined percentage, right? More times than not, people are putting a percentage there, right? As much as I like to put 3%, I have compassion for buyers, right? So you don't have to pay additional money. I make sure that no buyer pays me any money out of their own pocket. And don't spread this rumor, but on the buy side, I will reduce to 2%. Don't spread that rumor. I'm telling you as well in here right now, please. Thank you. As we get further down,
So why can't you put on there that the seller's gonna pay your commission?
I can't put that there. However, over here, I could check that box and say include in any offer that the seller is willing to pay my commission.
Okay,
I can't put that here, right? And here, this has to be defined things. This has to be defined like dollar amounts, right? Whether it's a flat fee, whether it's a retainer, right? Or
we don't take retainers.
are we allowed to take retainers in New Jersey?
We could, but the BCP doesn't want us doing retainers, because it means it has to be kept in the trust account.
As you work your way down this line, I'm just gonna explain to you all the different responsibilities and duties that I have for you, right? If you want me to just keep it very simple. Be a good person and do the right thing and look out for your client, is basically what all that says, right? I encourage you to read this. I don't believe that anybody should sign anything without fully reading it. And you are going to have questions on it, because I'm pretty confident there's things in here that you've never read before, right? So I'm not expecting you to understand all of it, but I am expecting you to sign it and then come back to me with questions that you have, or ask me the questions and then sign it. Again, they're speaking about dual agency there, right? I told you 2 different instances on what a dual agent is. I could represent both the buyer and the seller, or somebody in here could have a listing that I'm showing it to you, and in that instance, we'd be considered a dual agency. I don't really ever get all down this stuff. I think this is just a bunch of long verbiage that's not necessarily needed, in my opinion. Don't tell my broker that though, because she'll probably yell at me. And then ultimately back here on the list page, if there's any additional things that we'd like to add in here, right? If you don't want to see specific properties in a specific town, or if I don't find you show you 10 properties in the next week, or whatever the case may be, we can put additional terms and define things in here that if I don't own up to. Or live up to the standard, you can cancel this at any time. Do you have any questions?
And how would I go about canceling it if it wasn't working out for the two of us?
You can do that in a couple different ways, right? It says right here. If you give me written notice, right, through email or even text message saying that you want to cancel the property, we don't put it in a defined day here. Amount, then within 3 days after receiving that, it's canceled. I always just put 1 day. Okay, I don't want anybody to ever feel like they're handcuffed to me and they have to spend the rest of their life with me. If you don't wanna work with me, no disrespect, I don't wanna work with you either, right? There's no hard feelings, so whenever you feel. That some type of way that I'm not doing a good job, you let me know and we'll terminate this. But I promise you that I'm gonna do a good job and we're gonna cross the finish line.
Did that take an hour to discuss? No. You see how effortless that was? It was conversation. It wasn't scripted. He knew it, he was pointing to it, but he wasn't reading verbatim what the form said. Cause he studied this enough to know what each of those paragraphs mean. So how do you get that way? It's practice. It's role playing. Just what we were doing here. Couple of agents could get together at lunchtime for pizza in Hasbrook Heights at 6 o'clock and role play. Give them objections. But when I asked him if, why couldn't you put in seller will pay the commission? Because I don't know if any of you have, but that's one of the biggest reasons Janine rejects the buyer agency agreement, because there's no percentage on that form. And it says in there, because they already know, because they're filling out the form, the same time they're signing the contract, which shouldn't be, they already know that the seller's paying the commission on the property they're putting the offer through. So they don't have that conversation with the buyer about the percent that the buyer's getting. And they just put in seller's gonna pay the commission, and we have to kick it back. Because under that very line, it says the commission must be objectively attainable and may not be open-ended. E.g., it cannot provide that the broker's commission will be whatever amount the seller or listing broker's offering. So it says you can't do it right under the space where you have to put the amount in. But we still kick back exclusive buyer agency agreements because it's done just that. But it's a year ago, everybody was overwhelmed. We had agents that wanted us to take a 5-page document and condense it into 2 pages. By the time legal got done with that, you needed a magnifying glass to read it because they had to reduce the font so much. It still said the same thing that the 5 pages said. But it was they were overwhelmed by the amount of pages. But if you study it and you know the lingo and you can explain it, that didn't take long. He's got an appointment at 1:30. He got through all these documents except explaining the contract of sale in under 30 minutes. More like 15, really.
And to be honest with you, during a buyer consultation, and now she kind of has me thinking about it a little differently now. I don't ever really explain the sales contract right then and there. Maybe I should. I do explain the sales contract when it comes time to put an offer together. Right, the same way that I explained all that is the same way that I explain all this. I'm big on over explaining things. Right, when you don't over explain something, the thing that you don't explain is what's going to become the issue. Right, that's always the case. Oh, you didn't tell me that, and then it turns into a big deal when it's really not a big deal, right? Just know the documents, and then all it is a conversation. Right, after all of that, granted, most people are overwhelmed by the time you get to the end, right? Because you just gave them all kinds of stuff that they have no idea what the heck you're talking about, right? And yeah, I was kind of flying through that to a certain extent, 'cause I know I do have to get out of here at 1:30, jump on a call. And actually it was probably even better because I have a tendency, you learned this yesterday. I could go off on tangents, right? I have a hard time staying between the lines sometimes, which we were in here for an hour and a half yesterday, if not longer, right? Keeping things short isn't usually my strong suit, but it's all it is a conversation. So, what do you got?
So it was recommended to meet the buyer in person or over the
I do,
phone
I think it's,
always.
I think that you're setting the standard right then and there, right? It does slow things down. Does slow things down, right? But at the same time, as I said before, you're then controlling it. Right? You're then setting the standard on how you're doing things as a professional, right? When you're dropping everything and running and you're asking somebody to sign this document outside of showing, that doesn't look professional. I'm not gonna say I've never done it before, right? The first time I had the buyer agency agreement signed was in a Dunkin' Donuts in Hawthorne, right? That time, the first time I explained it, I sucked, I'll admit that, right? They were kind of looking at me like, wait, what am I signing right now? It's the first time I met people, met them. English wasn't their first language, didn't really speak that much English. Now here's this like Ringo Realtor asking them to sign their life away. Yeah, right. You know what I mean? But and with them, it was every time we went out, we had to sign a new agreement, and that went on for weeks. And then finally, I was like, guys, did I prove myself to you yet? Right? And it went from them not trusting me to them not making a move without talking to me, more than they didn't trust, they trusted me more than their attorney, more than the lender, it was a referral from the lender. And that's usually what happens, in the beginning, their guard is up, right? On anything, right, buyers or sellers, right? It's up to you to kind of get through that guard, right? And have them open up and see that, hey, I am an advocate for you, right? Even to this day, they do not make any type of move in regards to their home without bouncing it off me, and I love it because it's the trust that I built with them at this point, you know?
Better to email them these documents before you meet them, give them a chance to read it.
I'm gonna say that it depends on the situation, right? Sometimes if it's a brand new person. No, I want them coming in person and me fully explaining this, because if you send somebody all these documents, they're gonna get a little overwhelmed. They're not gonna know what they're signing, right? And I think by somebody coming in, and now, again, it is an additional step, right? But I'm not big. I don't rush things, right? Even on like on listings, I'm still like one of the few people I know, I do it like 2 steps, right? Meaning I won't go in there and just give them a number. Can I? Yeah, I can if I really wanted to. Have I lost listings by that? Not that I know of, maybe, right? But I don't. I always make a joke. I'm Scottish. I'm not Russian. Like I don't rush and do anything. It's just not who I am, right? I like to.
The other key point is this is all pulled into your buyer consultation. So it gives you an opportunity to have the conversation about the buyer's wants, what they like, what they want, and what they ultimately need. And you have to have the hard conversation with them and say, I'm good. I'm good at what I do, but I'm not gonna find you everything on your list. So I need you to tell me what you can't live without and what you're okay with. So if they've got 5 kids, you're probably not gonna show them a 3-bedroom house. So it's like, then that, that's their non-negotiable. But it's a conversation. The more conversation you have, the better the rapport is gonna be. Diana, what do you do on a buyer's consultation? What's the lingo you use?
Usually I have the mortgage guy meet me. So they can have the real estate questions, they can have the mortgage side of the questions. I explain the buyer agency agreement. And then we talk about their criteria, what they can live with, what they can't live without. And usually right on the spot, the mortgage person can actually give them a range of off the bat what we can start shopping with, and then they get excited because we can usually go out in a day or 2.
Mhm.
So it actually works out, and then they feel more comfortable seeing you face to face than you know, you're usually on the phone and you have them come into the office the first time, they get to ask you all these questions, they feel comfortable with you, they feel comfortable with the mortgage broker, I go and deal with a lot of police officers, so they actually all tell me, they're like, we always watch all these TikToks and to be careful of mortgage and real estate agents and this. So they all feel comfortable seeing you face to face and actually having that conversation with you.
So you meet them in office,
Mhm.
you call them, have you tell them?
Yeah, I tell them anytime they want to come in. And they come in and I usually answer all their questions, we have a conversation about what they're looking for, sometimes I even open my laptop to show them what's on the market right now, just so they could see. I set them up on, or email. Go from there, and they usually ask slew of questions to you and the mortgage side, so they kind of get everything out of the way.
Do you give them business cards if they're gonna pop in an open house when you sit down the first time?
All the time.
Or you need to show that they're working with somebody.
Right. I mean, most agents, if they're worth their weight in salt, are going to accept it and that you're working with somebody. If I knew I couldn't be with a buyer, I'd call the listing agent and say, look, John and June are gonna come by your open house. They've got my business card, but in case they forget it, I just wanted to let you know that I'm sending them to your open house. And they're my buyers. And they say, okay. Because you know what? When they pick up the phone and they call you because you've got a listing that you're doing an open house on, they want the same reciprocity with the other agents. But I always put a little rubber band around a pack of business cards and say, look, I can't be with you. You could be driving home from your grandparents' house and there's an open house sign that I hadn't told you about or just came on the market. You can go, give the agent my business card and we'll follow up. So that's, don't get your business cards to grow dust, but that's all. And you're building this trust and you're building a feeling between them that you know what they want. You're not going to send them listings that they don't want, because that's the first way to kill the deal, is to start sending them things. I told you I don't want a Cape Cod. Well, make sure that when you're building that search in the MLS, that you're not sending them a Cape Cod. Sometimes they're stuck on a colonial. And you might have to gently say, have you considered a buy level? Why don't we go look at a buy level? Have that lingo with them, explain the different, you can go as far as to explain the different style houses. Because some of them, a new buyer, I used to love to work with new buyers. They were the best. And they don't know the difference between a Cape Cod and a tri-level split and a sugar maple split and a bi-level, a ranch, a raised ranch, or a townhome. Maybe they knew what a townhome was, but they got to understand. And that's all part of, you're their teacher, especially when you're going to sit down and have a consultation with a new first-time home buyers. You are their guide. You're their teacher. They haven't done this before. They are as green as they come. And they rely on you to be the teacher, to have the conversations, to say the things that will make them feel comfortable with you and to get them over the hump and start to want to get excited about seeing something. The sales contract, we used to have to explain every page. And the reason that we're doing this today is because agents have gotten away from sitting down. They may have the conversation and that's like, all right, I'll prepare all the documents and I'll send them to you through DocuSign. And never having it explained it. One other thing with wire fraud that Keith didn't mention that I do is that usually when the scam comes and it's an email and it's coming, it looks like the attorney letterhead or title company, and it'll say wire it. If you have any questions, call, and the number's on that form. You have to tell your buyers, don't call the number on the form, because that's a scam too. So you could be, if they call the number on the bogus email to the wiring instructions, they're gonna get somebody, God only knows where. It's gonna say, I just got this form, I wanna make sure it's legitimate. Oh, absolutely. So make sure you give those buyers their contact information. If they're using Carnegie Title, give them Ryan's number. If they're using another title company, give them the title rep's number. Make sure they have their mortgage rep's number, the attorney. If you get anybody asking you for money, call the number I gave you. Don't call the number on the email. Because they're just gonna yes you to death and you're gonna be sending $10,000 to Timbuktu. So that's just another level. Why do we do this? It keeps you from being on the side of errors and omissions. You all pay that errors and omissions insurance, and that's just one level of it. Because if somebody's upset, if a buyer or seller are upset about something and they had a loss, it's everybody's problem. But it's not their problem because they didn't make the phone call. It's everybody else's problem. So by signing wire fraud notice, we've at least said, we discussed it. Key word, we discussed it. We didn't just send it in a DocuSign and have them sign it. The same thing when you're listing a rental and it's the lead-based paint disclosure law that started in 2022, that every apartment has to be inspected at the time of a tenant transfer or a change in tenants, or every 2 years. So even with the tenants there and the tenant loves that landlord and they got a great relationship, on year 3 of that lease by law, that apartment needs to be re-inspected for lead paint. The way the consumer information.
One that we have that says that it's almost like wire fraud, like.
It's a lead,
oh, you
it's,
get the lead-based paint.
it's
inspection.
called the lead paint disclosure law. So that comes in when they're signing lead paint and disclosing that they're, you know, it was built prior to 1978. On a rental, there's a form that says the lead paint disclosure law, which says you've told them, Mr. Landlord, you need to have this before the tenant moves in, you need to have the apartment inspected. Now, if the landlord was savvy and when this first came out, there were some landlords that spent the money and had their apartments inspected and have the certificate for it. And that's okay. Take a copy of that and throw it in your command opportunity for that landlord.
That's only if it's before 1970.
1978 was when they changed from leaded paint to unleaded paint.
So only if the apartment was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the lead paint disclosure law comes from, and the way they determined which towns were a visual test and which towns were a white. Do you know how they determined that? Rob?
What do you mean, how do you determine which?
How
they-
the state determined which towns had to have a
visual
swipe
focus?
or who could get away with just a visual.
Yeah, how do they determine?
The number of lead paint contamination cases in the town.
No way.
And believe it or not, Hasbrook Heights is not a visual. It has to be the swipe. Because there were, I believe because of the number of apartments that we have in Hasbrook Heights, that elevated the number of lead poisoning cases of children in the town, but that's where it was determined by, the number of lead poisoning cases, because they have to be reported to the state.
Cases meaning who's submitting lawsuits?
Well, not a lot, if a child was diagnosed with lead
That's a
paint
case.
poisoning, it's a case, just like if it opens up a case that they have to report that. The same as if they have to open up an EPA, an environmental, if there was a leakage of an oil tank. So that's where that's where they determined it. And some towns don't even understand that. Most landlords don't understand that they have to get it redone. Some landlords spent the money to have the home professionally inspected and get a permanent all clear sign.
Garfield asks for a lead paint inspection even for the sale of the property.
It's coming to that. It's coming to that.
Just another way for the state of New Jersey to charge people more money.
Correct, correct.
Cause with all, it was the lead paint, the CO and then another fire side inspection, so altogether it was $500.
Yeah.
For Garfield, for a sale of a 2-family.
So I'm wondering if that was if it was just indicative of two-family with the lead paint. And not, and I'd be curious to find out if you
Yeah.
come across it under residential.
Because that was family owned, so I did explain to them there was never tenants and there was just family that lived there. They didn't care.
So have you all read the contract of sale? You know what it says? You really need to do some reading. Print one out and read it over. And like I said yesterday, I whenever I say back in the day, but back in the day. We used to do contracts on legal paper. And we printed 6 copies out. And there was no DocuSign. In early 2000s. Your buyers came back, you showed them a house. They called you on the phone and say, I wanna put an offer in. You said, okay, what are you gonna offer? How much are you putting down? I'm going to the office, I'll prepare the contracts, come up to the office in an hour. And they would come into the conference room and here would be 6 copies, legal size paper. And we handed one to the buyer 1, one to buyer 2, and the agent had the third. And we went page by page. And explained everything that they were signing. Legally, you've got 3 days after it's signed, it's going into attorney review. The attorney is gonna talk to you about it. You can cancel the contract in attorney review. I used to sometimes, as I got into that, I used to say, most times the attorneys take this and they kind of rip it up and they have their own. But we still had to provide the contracts and explained everything, explained inspection contingencies. That you can't have your uncle, I know he knows how to build, your uncle can't inspect the house. It has to be a licensed home inspector. And then they're gonna get a report, you're gonna look at the report, your attorney, you're gonna discuss it with your attorney, you're gonna come up with the things that concern you. And he's gonna send it to the seller's attorney and you're gonna negotiate. You may not get everything that's wrong with it, but they're gonna make an offer, it could be, maybe they're not gonna fix it, it could be cash. But this was the dialogue back and forth. I wasn't like reading verbatim, but I explained it to them. We get to the part about I can't think of it now, radon testing, home inspection, Megan's Law. I can't tell you about Megan's Law. And if there are anybody, but here's the website, it's right here. You have concerns, go on the website, look up the town, they'll tell you. It's there, and what level the offender was. And I totally understand if it's something that really concerns you, we don't have to proceed. We can go look at something else.
Can I ask you a question
Mm-hmm.
about the contract? What does the clause on, I don't even know what page it is, the point of entry? What is that?
That's for septic.
Only for septic?
Yeah,
Which means, what about septic?
so it says that you're gonna have, if you're buying a house. And it's in a septic area, in addition to your regular home inspection, you are going to have a company come out and inspect that. Septic system,
Separate inspection.
it's a separate inspection. And it could be thousands of dollars. to repair it. And it's something that you have to maintain on an annual basis.
You get inspected.
And get it, well, not getting, it's basically service, you have to get your septic system serviced. And sometimes I'd have that conversation if the buyers wanted to look out west. And where you would look on, when you pull up the listing, you'd see, instead of municipal under sewer, it says septic. Septic. So they had decided to go look at a town where every listing said septic. So we had to have the conversation. Do you understand what a septic system is? Do you understand what that there's annual maintenance on a septic system? Are you okay with it? Do you understand, depending upon where the septic system is in that rear of that yard, you may not have that big, beautiful in-ground pool that you envision having on the property, because wherever that system is in your rear yard, you can't do anything with it.
So it's only septic, that point, that's right.
Mhm.
And also another thing on the contract, I think they changed a couple of years ago, you notice where they say you're supposed to have, so you should have 2 walkthroughs for
Two.
closing. Not any, I haven't seen any, and it's actually a great idea, you should actually do 2 walkthroughs, but nobody does 2 walkthroughs.
They do too, sometimes they'll wait now, buyers are waiting till the home is
The
vacant.
day of closing, right?
Day of closing, I mean, most times my buyers would go an hour before the closing. Well, sometimes you went the hour, or if they had to be at the attorney's office at 1, we were doing the walkthrough at 11, the movers were still there. So then you tell the buyers, look, you're within your thing because you saw the house, it still wasn't broom swept clean. You can ask your attorney to hold something in escrow until you go back to the house and make sure. Cause once I had the buyer on it. And we got there, everything wasn't out. They got back, when they moved this refrigerator out of the kitchen, it wasn't a tile floor, it was a linoleum floor. And somehow in getting the refrigerator on or off the cart, it gouged the linoleum. And then they had to call the returning. So you can, if you're looking at a house and it isn't all empty, your buyer's well within the rights to ask the attorney to hold something back in escrow till you can go back and see.
Yeah, that's such a weird, like, my question is like with the 2 walkthroughs, when do you do the first walkthrough? Like, it's such a gray area, like, why are you gonna do a first walkthrough 2 days before you close, cause the movers aren't coming till. Usually the day of closing, it's empty and.
I think the 2 walkthroughs could be, if you went through it once and it was vacant and you just wanna go back in again and make sure that the water's on, that the water's running. That all of the systems, everything flushes right, it's a real quick bing, bing, bang, so it could be that.
Cause I just had an issue last week where we had a closing and there was still furniture left and.
Mhm.
So, like, we don't wanna be left holding the bag on the real estate side, because the contract basically says you should do 2 walkthroughs. So if the attorney or the buyer really wants to say, well, it says on the contract, you should have did 2 walkthroughs, you kind of look stupid because. You just did the walkthrough 3 hours before closing, which is pretty much standard. And everybody does a 1 walkthrough, but the contract actually says do 2 walkthroughs. And it's just weird, like, when would you do that other walk?
Was that an attorney? No, it's under final, hang on.
Yeah.
Initial and final walkthroughs. In addition to the inspections set forth, seller agrees to permit buyer or buyer's duly authorized representative to conduct an initial and final walkthrough inspection of the interior and exterior of the property at any reasonable time before the closing. So it could be an initial, but if, say the sellers move out on Monday. And you're not closed until Friday, you could
It's
do,
easy to-
you could do the initial and then you do the final.
Yeah,
But I want Rob to share it's a little, it's FYI. Talk about the attorney review, if we have an unrepresented buyer.
And unrepresented buyer, it's not gonna have an attorney?
Right.
It's rare.
But that there's no, the attorney review, the 3-day attorney review period on a contract, when you explain it, that's because 2 agents drew up the contract. And we're not supposed to practice law. And that's the other conversation, that when you get to this opinion 26, do you know what the purpose of opinion 26 is? First thing on opinion 26 is the law requires real estate brokers to give you the following information before you sign this contract. It requires us to tell you that you must read all of it before you sign, and the purpose to help you with the purchase of sale. Point number 2, you will not get legal advice from the agent. You as a real estate agent are not allowed to practice law. And that's why they have an attorney. And they have a 3-day attorney review period, and their attorney's gonna handle that. You can't give legal opinions. You're not an attorney. And real estate commission has been known to fine an agent if they find them practicing and giving out legal information and practicing law. So any questions on the lingo for the buyers? Did I baffle you?
Buyer's agency agreement, that's a whole nother class.
Well, Keith did a good job on that, and that's what I wanted him to, you have to make it, and I firmly believe, we wanna do, role playing, the more the better, to role play it. Cause ultimately what we want you to do is to be able to have the conversation about that, like Keith had. For 2 reasons. Number 1, he was really good at it and it didn't take that long. But number 2, having it in that kind of a conversational tone, and this is what's gonna happen, and I'm good at what I do, and I'm gonna negotiate for you, even if you don't wanna pay the commission. It came without any effort from him. And that's, if you can deliver it that way, the buyers are gonna sign it. And Mr. Buyer, you can do 1 day. You can do a week. It could be for a property. The only caveat we warn you is that you make the exclusive buyer agency agreement for 123 Main Street. The buyer loved 123 Main Street, and you put an offer in, and they were the 25th offer on the table, and they went with somebody else. Now you start to show the buyers more properties. Do you have an exclusive buyer agency agreement signed? No.
No.
Because the one you did to get the buyer over the hump of working with you, it was their first time. So the buyer agency agreement that you had with them was for that one property. So now the conversation, okay, Mr. Buyer, gee, I'm so sorry that we weren't able to get that house. There were 25 offers on it. They're keeping us as a backup, but in the kind of market that we're in right now, we really need to get back out there and start looking again. The first exclusive buyer agency agreement that you and I signed was just for 123 Main Street. So I'd like to prepare a new one for you to sign, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to make it for the next 3 months. Because now you've proven your worth to the buyer. So if they were hesitant on the first house, now you've had an opportunity, they've worked with you, you've explained paperwork, you've drawn up a contract, you negotiated, you didn't get it. I'm hoping that they feel comfortable enough with you now to say, okay, yeah, for 3 months. But then you've got to put a note in your phone or a flag on in their command account of when your buyer agency agreement's going to expire. So say you had a 3 month, and now you're getting to the end of that 3 months. They're actively looking, you want to extend it. You don't have to get a new one. All you have to do is change the ending date on the buyer agency agreement and have them initial it. You initial it and they initial it. So you can extend a buyer agency agreement that way. But you just have to make sure that you know when your buyer agency agreements are expiring.
So do we put in an address over there, or in case it's for 3 months, or what do we put in the address?
I wouldn't put an address. Like he said, he put in all of New Jersey. You don't have to. And that comes from your buyer consultation. Where do you want to live? Where are you looking? Well, I live in Bergen County. Bergen County's getting to be a little expensive. If I found the right property, I wouldn't be opposed to looking in a town in Passaic County, as long as it's not in a flood zone, and out in Morris County where my daughter lives. So you could put Bergen, Passaic, and Morris. For where? If you put a town in, you have now said, I can only show Mr. Buyer properties in Rutherford. And we all know a buyer, the first town they say they want to look in is never the town they buy in.
Just out of curiosity. Let's say somebody does just put Rutherford. And then. For whatever reason, you send them a property that was in. Woodridge. And you showed them the property in Woodridge. Submitted an offer on that property in Woodridge. They submit the file, nobody says anything. 2 years later, the real estate commission comes knocking on the door just up as they pull that file. What would the fine be for putting it in a different town? Is that up to their discretion?
It's up to their discretion. I mean, I know that we heard that an agent got fined, I want to say $20,000.
The date, 25.
Yeah, because the date of the EBA was the same as the date of the contract. And they tracked it down to when it was ARIPT in the
Do you
MLS.
understand what she's saying with that, right? Imagine that. That would suck. Like I have a client right now who's out of town and I said. If I have him sign this right now, it's gonna be a different date. I said, I gotta wait until this guy comes back in town, he has to manually sign it because of the date. $25,000, that's a little crazy.
That's why I would never put a town, one town.
I would put counties.
It's county. You're safer there because they're going to change their mind. And the easiest thing they're gonna change their mind is they're not seeing what they want in Rutherford. Okay, let's move up. Let's go look in Woodridge. Let's go look in Hesper Heights. If you have Bergen County, you're okay. And then nothing says you couldn't put Bergen Passaic on there, even if they're not even thinking of that. Well, or you could put Old Jersey. But then understand, if you put Old Jersey and your buyer decides they want to go look in Long Branch, or they want to go look in Wildwood, you've got the buyer agency agreement on that. And if they wanted to go to Wildwood, you'd have to either go down there and show it, or you'd have to cancel your buyer's agency agreement for Wildwood and let them sign another buyer's agency agreement. Because a buyer can have more than one buyer agency agreement with different agents.
All for different towns.
Because it's different counties or different towns. Yesenia did that here. She had the buyer's agency agreement for this point, and the buyer at some point had said, well, we're still not out of the decision that we might not look in Tom's River or if someplace further. She contacted another KW agent, got a referral for the buyer, And they picked up the further points in the state of New Jersey.
Don't you think it's smarter just to put New Jersey though, because. I wouldn't wanna lose a client because. I put Hudson County and that person wants to go live in somewhere in Passaic County, like, so what? I could drive to Passaic County, I got a car.
Yeah, I would see, I would say that you could standardize it. Bergen, Passaic, Essex, Hudson. And maybe Morris. That's really where you're going. You could do Old Jersey. And then edit it, if they suddenly turn coat and say they wanna go down the shore. You could. Release them from that county and refer them to another agent.
So, do we have to be, if we set up the appointment for them to show a home, do we have to be present, like, just for some reason, if it's like down south and you can't make it, can they go on their own and take a look at the home?
No,
If you set up the appointment, oh, no?
no, because you're their representative. Now, if it was an open house, it would be different. Because you can call the agent doing the open house and saying, my buyer's not finding anything up here. We're starting to look down there and they'd like to come see your house, your listing on the open house on Sunday. They're gonna have my business card. Here's their names. Is that okay with you?
Mhm.
I can't imagine them saying no.
Yeah, but
It's
you
an
can't
open
have a
house.
showing agent, you can't use leverage and have a showing agent show that property,
A showing agent that's not in your office?
no, in your office.
In your office, you could if you had somebody.
So. If you schedule an appointment and it's in
Mhm.
South Jersey and you can't make it to South Jersey for whatever reason.
Okay.
You contact somebody within this tribe and say, hey, I need a little bit of showing help. I mean, I utilize it every day.
Cause your buyer agency agreement covers or. Anybody in their office, so that covers, cause that was the first concern a year ago. Especially on the teams and all that use showing agents, if I'm signing it. And Keith is gonna be a showing agent. How can they have a buyer's agency agreement, but your buyer's agency agreement will cover the showing agent.
That's when you utilize the WhatsApp.
So you compensate,
Mhm.
and how much is it generally?
I generally compensate between $35 to $50 a showing, depending on the distance, right? If I'm traveling. And I'm like out of town, and I'm gonna have somebody like do 5 showings or like a full day of showings, I'll pay them a day rate. Right, I'm not gonna necessarily pay, $50 per showing for 5 showings. It's really on a. Case by case basis, let's say, but on the low 35, on the high 50, right, if I have, if. I'm asking Calvin to go down to. The top part of Monmouth County. No, I'm gonna be considerate of that, that's gonna take gas, that's gonna take tolls, right, it's not. Tolls are expensive now, it's like, you go down a turnpike one time, if you're spending $20 just on tolls, so. It really, it depends on the showing, how long does it ultimately take? And I'm also considerate of time, right, if I'm asking somebody to do a showing in the middle of rush hour and I know they're gonna catch a bunch of traffic to get back. I mean, I'll try to encourage them as much as I can, hey, you can make phone calls when you're in traffic and I'll try to, get around that a little bit, but it all depends, you have to pay people for your time, right? And that's what it boils down to, you're paying somebody a couple of dollars to buy back your time, and I think that's what you're doing, you're buying back your time so that you can do whatever is in front of you. But it's also a tax write-off, right? That's the way I always look at it, everything's a tax write-off to me.
It's a personal transaction between the two agents, right, not through the office.
No, it's shit, you just
It's
add
just
and
that
I'll
it's
tell
a-
whatever, yeah, and then I just put the note in the thing, showing for blah, blah, blah.
So the lingo on listing agreements, fortunately for you, a lot of the lingo's the same. Because on listing paperwork, you have to fill out a CIS, you have to explain CIS. You have to explain wire fraud because they could attack the seller just as easily as the buyer. You have to explain informed consent to dual agency on the selling side. and you have lead paint. Whether they have lead paint or they were built after 1978 and they don't have lead paint. So that's pretty easy. They're the same documents on both sides of the transaction. What's different? Well, one of the things that's different is the very lengthy now seller's disclosure. This can seem overbearing, especially to senior citizens. But by law that went into effect in August of 2024, every listing has to have the seller's disclosure filled out. Every residential, which is 2-family, condo, townhouse. Even if the condo's on the 2nd or 3rd floor, and I had to go after a broker for one of the agents in here, what had a buyer for a property, and the broker says to me, well, they didn't have to fill out the seller's disclosure. I go, why? I said, it's a condo, they have to fill it out. I said, furthermore, they have to fill out the flood determination. It's on the, so the broker says, well, it's on the 2nd floor. It was one of those condos over, I think in Belleville, where it was like right on River Road, or where there's water real close. I said, well, can you tell me, does the parking lot flood? Seller has to disclose that. The new buyer's gonna park their car in that parking lot. They gotta know. New construction has to have a seller's disclosure
For the
filled out.
For the flood risk, that's part of the real estate compliance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's part of that, because now I've had multiple agents when I request the flood risk saying, what do you want? I just had one for, a big rental in North Haledon, and he didn't want to give it to me. Cause he said it's not in a flood zone, you don't need it.
And all they have to do is say no.
Not all brokerages, for some reason,
Yeah.
not all brokerages, like, I don't have.
It happens often.
Yeah, no, more times than you would think,
Mhm.
and I'm always forgetting, the first time I heard it, I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I think that we have to do it, right, but not every,
But that flood determination says not only if it's in a flood zone, but has it ever been impacted by like a nor'easter? I can't think of the word now. Like Hesperkites isn't in a flood zone. And if it comes down, if the rain comes down the boulevard and in 20 minutes and you get one of these heavy downpours, there are homes that are gonna get water and they're not in a flood zone. The same thing with a rental. It could be that they're impacted by a nor'easter, that it could occasional driveway flooding. That's what it says.